people know that we have 26 states that medical cannabis is now legal in? I just want to get an idea of our audience here. That's great. We also have 4 states that it's legal for adult use, and we have many more states in 2016 that this is up for a ballot initiative, including California for adult use and Florida for medical use. What this has done is this has opened up opportunities for investors to invest in an industry that is now becoming, it's a very immature industry at one point, but it's a very mature industry in another aspect. Never before has there been a product that has been proven in the marketplace that a legal industry has been formed around. We can go back to the prohibition of alcohol days, and we could see where that occurred and what happened after prohibition of alcohol ended. But we have an industry right now that is being formed around a product that people are breaking the law to get to. This creates tremendous opportunities for investment. Now, I have not always been a proponent for cannabis myself. I got involved in the industry after I was made aware that I had some medical problems, not only with myself, but family members. I was misdiagnosed with a mass on my pancreas back in 2012. And after 4 months of going to Moffitt Cancer Center, I was lucky to find out that I was okay and it was not cancer. But during that 4 months of time, I really reevaluated my entire life. And I started looking into cannabis as medicine. And I started learning more about the options that were out there for patients. My company that I was involved in for over 20 years was telecommunications phone cards. I was lucky enough to exit that business profitably, and I entered this industry as an investor. I joined a group called ArcView, and it's an investor network that's comprised of over 450 high net worth individuals that look at the cannabis industry as an opportunity. And over the last 2 years, they've invested over $65 million collectively into 72 different companies. Many of those companies have come out of that investment arena and have prospered. Some of those companies have actually gone public and they have stock symbols, so individual investors can now invest in that. In fact, there's over 400 companies that are in the sector. Now, that doesn't mean that you should look at those companies as just opportunities as what's going on. We still have to look at the industry to invest in it, just like you would any other industry. So what we look at, and what I want to talk to you about is what I look at for companies when I invest into them, is who's involved in the company, who's leading the business, and what type of team do they have with them? Also, what are they actually doing? So there's a lot of risky investments that I've seen investors put money into that have paid out tremendously. There's also other opportunities, which I'm going to call picks and shovels. And those are the accessory type businesses. Those are all the businesses that support the legal cannabis industry as it's growing. And those businesses are growing at just an enormous rate. There's opportunities with social media platforms. I don't know if you guys saw Mass Roots. They have a booth here. Medicine Man Technologies is another group that does consulting. They have one of the largest dispensaries, most successful dispensaries. It's been featured on Pop Barons. A lot of people have seen what their dispensary is like. They touch the plant, but they have another division that actually invests in doing consulting, going out and helping people get their licenses. Mass Roots, which I alluded to before, they've created actually like the Facebook for pot. It's a social network where people can actually connect with other users of the plant and communicate. And that's really an important feature in a culture that is growing. Those are just 2 that I've mentioned. The other opportunities that are out there are vast. So some of the things that I would say for you to look for as an investor is where this industry is going. What states are legalizing? What is happening in those states? And where the opportunities lie. When I first entered, I was pulled many different directions. Great ideas. Everybody has a great idea for a business that's in here. But like I alluded to earlier, you really want to see who is prepared to execute those ideas. Do they have capital? Do they have support of big names in the industry? Do they have a leader of their business, a CEO that has experience in the past in another industry? Like I said earlier, I not always was in this. I was in telecommunications, wholesale distribution. When I decided to enter this space, I was alone. I spent about a year learning who was in the industry, what they were doing, just to find my own path. And then once I found it, I was actually able to convince the people that I worked with in my previous industry to move over. So with that being said, I'd like to answer any questions from the audience that you may have on the opportunities that are going on and see if I can help with filling in any of the knowledge that you may have. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. What's the glue? What we've done with the glue is we've created a software platform that connects manufacturers of products, legal products in the cannabis industry, with retailers that sell them. And when I say retailers, that's dispensaries, grow facilities, but more importantly, convenience stores, bodegas, smoke shops, holistic and wellness centers. We're seeing yoga studios selling everything from candles that smell with different terpenes to enhance your experience to actual devices. So what we've done, we became like the Cisco Foods for the industry. Are you familiar with Cisco Foods?
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody else have any questions? No questions?
What do you see?
Go ahead.
No, please. What do you see as some of the best opportunities right now for somebody to invest?
Right now, some of the best opportunities, it's very difficult to pinpoint a certain point. The industry is moving very quickly and it's pivoting. Laws are changing and rules are changing. So when I say when the opportunities to invest in is groups that have a really strong team that are going to be able to pivot with the industry and that are well capitalized for when things change. I anticipate that the federal government is figuring out a way that they can tax and profit from this industry. And as they develop and figure that out, the companies that have excelled are going to become targets, so to speak, of that. And as long as they're well capitalized, they can achieve profitability under the rules and the guidelines that the government sets forth. This is no different than the alcohol industry. If you want to open up a bar in Florida, you have to get a liquor license. You have to pay for insurance. You have to have standard operating procedures. So everything that's involved in any other business industry is in this industry. When I first entered prepaid calling cards back in the 90s, I had a mentor that was from Procter & Gamble. And basically phone cards was a new item. We did not know how it would work. We did not know if people would buy it. But what I was told by my mentor at Procter & Gamble was treat it like just any other consumable good, just like Q-tips. So that's what we did when we introduced prepaid calling cards. It grew to be a multi-billion-dollar industry in telecommunications that lasted for over 20 years. I was involved in it from 1998 until 2 years ago. When I entered the cannabis industry, I started going to events centric around cannabis. And I started seeing the same thing that I saw in the telecommunications industry. Except I was 28 when I started in telecommunications. Nobody knew how the products were going to be adapted and used. We know the demand for cannabis. We know the healing benefits that it's being exposed to as far as a way to alleviate pain, a way to treat cancer, a way for moms to help their children that have epilepsy. These are things that are now being researched that have not been researched before because of the illegality of it. There's a lot of opportunities in testing. because testing is going to be huge in this industry. A lot of opportunities in distribution, because the government is going to need to track products. They're going to need to know where they go from seed to sale. And then not only that from sale, but where they're moving to, so it could be taxed. So I see a lot of opportunities right now in the companies that are developing technologies that can be worked with this industry to help it evolve. Thank you.
As the industry, your industry matures and laws change and stigmas change, one of the things that might occur, there's probably low barrier, in some ways low barriers of entry in your industry. So you have certain larger players today that may not be interested in participating, but may be interested in participating later. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that you might see down the road as larger liquor companies or somebody else decide they want to get into that space? Who might be helping? Who might be hurting?
That's an excellent question. And right now, all of the change is being done from the ground level up. So a lot of people that have been...
They want to be on the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, the question was, as this industry matures and it grows, how do I see, because there's a low barrier of entry right now for a lot of cannabis growers, how that barrier of entry will change and attract larger investment groups when it legalizes, such as the alcohol industry possibly, to get involved, and how I see that changing. And it's a very excellent question. And I was around during deregulation of telecom, so I saw exactly how it occurred in the telecom industry. Really quickly, there were a lot of companies that made prepaid calling cards that were in the gray market. And I apologize if I'm making an analogy to another industry, but I think that it is a very, very close analysis of what occurred. And what happened was those barriers of entry were very low for those gray market producers. Now, if they wanted to become legal, it was a very high barrier of entry. It costs almost $1 million to get licensed in telecommunications if you license with each state and the federal government to pay your taxes correctly. You had to abide by the rules of each PUC, Florida Public Utilities Commission, California, and every state that you sold your products in. It was a very high barrier of entry. So what the government did was they found companies that were not complying and they fined them heavily. And those companies, unfortunately, failed. The people that did survive were the people that were very well capitalized in the telecommunications industry, and the ones that were able to negotiate with the government and reduce those fines that were levied on them and be able to pay to play, so to speak. I anticipate that in this industry, we will see that type of regulation come around. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm also thinking, for example, which companies might get bought out by larger players down the road.
Oh, absolutely.
And which ones might be just swept away by market forces because they can't compete with the larger players.
Okay, so if we look at a more recent business, Gluu electronic cigarettes, for example. Gluu electronic cigarettes was a company, I believe, based out of Florida, and Newport bought them for, I believe it was $120 million. Philip Morris also bought an electronic cigarette company. So the tobacco industry recognized that they were losing consumers to that technology that was evolved, and they acquired those companies. So I anticipate, or it could be anticipated from that occurrence, is that the alcohol industry, as they lose ground and people stop drinking a very harmful substance, which is alcohol, that companies that start building a point of presence, that have multiple locations and have implemented technologies to create consistency in their brand, would be the companies that those larger corporations look at. I have no idea right now who those companies are going to be. There's a few players right now. Dixie Elixirs I really like personally because they're expanding through franchises into other states. Medicine Man is another big player that is taking the structure of what they've done and implementing it and repeating it in other areas. But for that matter, I would say look into who is really making changes and they're capitalized at an ability that they would be a possible acquisition target for those larger companies. And I do anticipate that will happen as soon as the federal government changes what's called 280E. And is everybody familiar with what 280E is? So for those of you that are not familiar with what 280E is, it's the law that basically told Al Capone that he had to pay taxes on his illegal operations. So right now what 280E does is the companies that are operating in states legally, they're not allowed to deduct expenses. So they can't deduct the expenses for the normal things such as operating. And once that changes and the banks are able to really fully take the money from these businesses that are operating, I see that the buyout opportunities will begin. Right now is the time to start investing in these companies because it's very, very early. And I would say do your research and see who's making those moves, multiple states of presence. Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions? Well, I'd like to thank you for coming here, and I have a booth over here at The Gluu, and if you'd like to come over and speak to me personally about what I've done in the industry or where I see that it's going, I'd be happy to answer any of your personal questions. My email is tom@thegluu.com, and The Gluu is with 2 U's.com, and again, I'd like to answer any of your questions, and one of the things that I say is trust but verify with the companies that you're looking at. A lot of companies are in this public sector and they're trading at very high volumes, or they were trading in 2014 at very high volumes on election hopes. And there was no substance behind many of those companies. So a lot of surge in 2014 in the OTC market stocks was totally wiped away in 2015 when people realized that there was not a lot of substance behind many of these companies that were putting out multiple press releases. So if you see a company that's putting out a press release every time they sign up a vice president, every time that they sell a product, every time that anything happens in their business, do a little bit more investigating into that company. I was guilty of it myself. I invested into a lot of companies in 2014 that I believed were there, ready for when the changes were happening. And I lost a lot of money by getting excited and just putting money into what I thought was great. If I could go back personally, I would take a little bit extra time investigating the companies, getting to know who they are, finding somebody that is investigating the companies. There's a booth here called Technical 420, and they go out and they actually meet with the CEOs of the companies face to face, and they speak to them as they're making reports about the companies that are in this industry. And they really delve into the technical and the business behind the companies that are out there. So do your research or find somebody that's doing the research. Subscribe to what they're doing and basically learn as much as you can about it. But the opportunities are here. Right now is the time to do it. This is an industry as any other industry. When automobile industry, the technology industry, the internet industry, people did not know how the internet would do. People, like I said, people did not know how phone cards would sell. We know how this industry is going. The ArcView market research estimates it over $20 billion. Very shortly by 2017. There's other estimates that have it up to $60 billion. And that's just the touches of the plant. The accessory picks and shovels, things like if you have an iPhone, the glass and all the things that come along with your smartphone that have surged, is a $10 billion industry right now. The accessory market, and that's vaporizers, rolling papers, all of the different items, glassware that are being manufactured and sold. Some of these new products are very technologically advanced. There's a company called Magical Butter, which makes a botanically infused machine that takes botanicals and infuses it into butter. It's a product, it's an appliance. It's an appliance, but it addresses a real need in this industry. So right now, if your tolerance for risk is low, don't invest in anything that touches the plant if you're not comfortable with it. If you have a high tolerance for risk and you're willing to ride it out and you're willing to be investigated at some point on your investment, look at those opportunities that touch the plant. But in the meantime, you can look for companies that are actually have some substance behind them and they're supporting this industry. You know, they say in the gold rush, the people that really made the money were the people that sold the picks and shovels to the miners. Yes. Later on, yes.
Why is Gluu the best company in cannabis today?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the best company in cannabis today, but what it is it solves a real world problem. As these storefronts are opening to sell these products, since it has been in a gray market for many years, they haven't had the efficiencies that large businesses like Best Buy or Bed Bath & Beyond or large retailers have. So what the Gluu does, it actually helps to stick each one of these independent retailers that sell smoke shop accessories together to give them mass buying power, like the Gluu. But at the same time, it also helps new products that are being developed and being introduced into this industry, like companies that are producing child-proof bags, for instance, that lock up, that protect your medicine from children getting to them, into getting those products into distribution. So it solves two problems. It helps companies that are creating products bring it into distribution, and it also helps these companies that are looking for products find the newest items that are out there and get access to them at the best prices. Thank you. Well, thank you again, and I'd be happy again to answer any last questions before we round it up. Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the show. I expect that you'll be hearing more about cannabis and cannabis investment opportunities over the next year with the election. We anticipate that it will be a hotly discussed industry throughout 2016, just like it was in 2014. But I do recommend that just because a company or a person like myself gets up here and talks to you about cannabis, don't take what they say as gospel. Investigate who's speaking in front of you. Don't just take what I'm telling you as what's the truth. Research, trust but verify. So you may go to a lot of conventions and see a lot of people that get up and speak to you about opportunities in this industry, and many of them may be great, and many of them may not be so great. Do your investigation of who's speaking about the industry in front of you. Thank you.
And especially when you include